Usually when we think about a map, there's this ingrained expectation of borders.
Right, like an edge or a boundary.
Yeah, exactly. You look at a map of geography, and eventually you hit a coastline, the paper turns blue, the cartographer draws a few waves, maybe a sea monster if it's old enough, and points to it.
Yeah, essentially saying, there it is, the edge of the world.
Right. And that gives us this comfortable feeling.
It provides a sense of closure, biologically speaking. We have this innate psychological desire for our territory to be measurable, right?
Yeah.
To be fully charted. Knowing where things end gives us a solid framework for understanding our place within them.
But the thing is, the moment you take that cartographic mindset, that need for borders, and apply it to the realm of human knowledge and discovery, that map starts behaving very strangely.
It really does. It falls apart.
Yeah, because we are looking at an intellectual landscape today that completely defies the very concept of an edge. We are setting out on a mission, you and I, to explore the ultimate boundaries of human understanding.
It's a huge undertaking.
It is, and we're unpacking a stack of sources today to answer, honestly, one of the most profound questions ever asked. Is there a final limit to knowledge?
It is a question that forces you to confront the architecture of reality itself.
Mm-hmm.
To figure this out, we're drawing from this phenomenal essay titled The Endless Horizon: Boundaries and Infinite Frontiers of Knowledge.
And we also have a really rigorous breakdown of Gödel's Incompleteness theorem.
Right, and I know those titles might sound like heavy academic lifting.
A bit intimidating, sure.
Yeah, but our goal today is to simply dissect the mechanics of these ideas. We are looking at biology, physics, and pure logic to see where the walls are, if they even exist at all.
Exactly. And if you're listening, don't worry, you don't need a PhD in quantum physics to follow along. We're going to connect the dots. So, okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even ask if knowledge has an end, we need to establish what we actually mean when we use the word knowledge.
Right, we have to define the terms.
Yeah, we aren't just talking about, like, memorizing trivia or knowing the capital of North Dakota. The sources lay out a very strict anatomy of knowing.
They do. They describe it as a three-legged stool. Knowledge must be true, it must be justified, and it must be understood.
Let's break those down.
Well, that definition is crucial because it filters out pure belief and coincidence. So let's look at that first pillar, true. For something to be knowledge, it must correspond to objective reality.
Meaning it actually matches the universe.
Exactly. Centuries ago, there was a widespread consensus that the Earth was the stationary center of the universe.
The geocentric model.
Right. And that was a fiercely held belief. It was taught, it was violently defended, but it was never actual knowledge.
Because it simply didn't match the physical mechanics of the solar system.
Precisely. Knowing that the Earth orbits the sun, however, that aligns with the physical universe. So it passes the first test.
Right, but truth alone isn't enough, which is where the second pillar comes in. It has to be justified. And I want to push on this a bit, because this is where a lot of our daily assumptions just sort of fall apart.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, say I buy a lottery ticket, and I am absolutely convinced, purely on a gut feeling, that the numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, and 42 are going to win.
Okay, so here you go.
And then, against all odds, they actually do win. I believed it, and my belief turned out to be true, but I didn't actually know it, did I?
You didn't know it because you had no methodology. You lacked a verifiable mechanism to arrive at that conclusion. You just got statistically incredibly lucky.
Right, so a lucky guess isn't knowledge.
Exactly. Justification requires evidence, reasoning, mathematical proof, or empirical observation. For instance, knowing how the electrical grid works is justified knowledge.
Because we can prove it.
Yeah, we can measure the voltage. We can observe the current. We can build transformers that predictably step that power up and down. The methodology proves the truth.
Which brings us to the third pillar, understood. And this implies the absolute necessity of a mind. The information has to be processed and synthesized, The sources make a really interesting distinction here between just raw data and actual knowledge.
What's fascinating here is the distinction between a mere state of being and an active act of comprehension.
Like the geode example from the text.
Yes. A physical object like a geode contains information. Its crystalline structure tells a very detailed story about the mineral composition and the heat and pressure over millions of years.
But the rock itself doesn't know any of that.
Exactly. The geode doesn't know its own history. The rock possesses no understanding. It isn't until a geologist comes along, cracks it open, analyzes the structure, and synthesizes that data into a coherent framework, that's when the raw information becomes knowledge.
It requires a conscious agent. So to recap for you listening, It has to be true, justified, and understood. Now that we have the rules of the game, our sources present us with an ultimate binary choice about where this whole human project of gathering knowledge is actually heading.
There are basically two distinct forks in the road here.
Right. Possibility one, knowledge has a final, hard limit, meaning eventually every single thing that can be known about the universe will be discovered. The catalog is complete.
Done. Finished. And then there's possibility two. Knowledge has no final limit. The pursuit is boundless, and new discoveries simply generate the terrain for further discoveries endlessly.
I try to visualize this as a massive puzzle. Possibility one suggests human knowledge is a jigsaw puzzle. It might have a billion pieces, it might be incredibly frustrating, and it might take humanity 10,000 years to put it together.
But theoretically, there's a last piece.
Exactly. Theoretically, you place that final corner piece, you step back, and there it is, the universe, solved.
And the alternative.
Possibility two is more like one of those procedurally generated video games, like Minecraft. The further you walk in any direction, the computer's algorithm just renders new mountains, new caves, new oceans. The map generates itself infinitely as a consequence of your exploration.
That's a great way to frame it. But to figure out whether reality is a jigsaw puzzle or a procedurally generated map, we have to look at the physical constraints of the players.
Meaning us.
Us, and the constraints of the board, the universe itself.
Mhm.
We have to start by examining the biological hardware.
The brain's hard drive. Let's talk about the biological limits. Because for all our philosophical grandeur, humans are ultimately biological organisms. We are made of meat, blood, and chemical electricity.
We have physical boundaries.
Yeah, the human brain, as spectacular as it is, has physical dimensions. It has a finite number of neurons, a finite number of synaptic connections, and it processes information at a finite speed dictated by the laws of thermodynamics.
The sources emphasize this brilliantly by asking you to imagine memorizing every single grain of sand on Earth.
Which just sounds absurd.
Right, but think about it. Not estimating them, but knowing the precise location, weight, and shape of every individual grain.
It's conceptually impossible.
It is fundamentally impossible. The sheer volume of data would require more synaptic states than exist in the entire human brain.
Wow.
And this biological bottleneck implies something deeply humbling. Just as an ant, with its rudimentary nervous system, possesses no biological capacity to comprehend calculus or orbital mechanics.
We have our own ceiling.
Yes. We must concede that the universe likely contains concepts, structures, or dimensions so vastly complex that the human brain literally lacks the physical architecture to ever grasp them.
I see the point, but I have to push back on this a little. I mean, you're talking about the naked human brain, but humanity hasn't relied on the naked human brain since we invented writing, right?
That's true. We outsource our cognition.
Yeah, we outsource our memory. We build tools. If the brain is too small to count the grains of sand, we just build a supercomputer to do it for us. Doesn't technology completely bypass this biological limit?
Well, it stretches the limit, certainly, but it doesn't bypass it.
Ah.
This leads directly to the concept of computational limits.
Okay, how so?
Because even when you remove biological exhaustion and rely on advanced silicon or quantum computing, computation is still a physical process. It requires energy, it requires physical space, and most importantly, it requires time.
Meaning even the ultimate theoretical supercomputer has a physical speed limit.
Precisely. Let's look at the mechanics of why that is. Information is physical. To flip a bit in a computer from a 0 to a 1 requires a minimum amount of energy. It's a concept known in physics as Landauer's principle.
So computational power is strictly tied to thermodynamic laws.
Yes, and the sources give a really compelling example of this. Trying to predict complex, chaotic systems like global weather patterns. Imagine trying to predict the weather centuries in advance, down to the exact millimeter of rainfall.
The butterfly effect on steroids, basically.
Exactly. Chaos theory dictates that infinitesimal changes in initial conditions create massive, sweeping variations in outcomes over time.
Right, so you need perfect data.
To compute that with perfect accuracy, a supercomputer would have to track literally every atom in the atmosphere. The processing power required is so unfathomably massive that to run the calculation, it would take longer than the current age of the universe.
Wait, really? So the data theoretically exists out there, but harvesting it is practically impossible because the universe would end before the computer's progress bar hit 100%.
That's exactly it. The computation simply outlasts the cosmos. The required resources exceed the entire inventory of reality. That is a hard computational wall.
Okay, so our biological brains are too small, and our artificial brains run out of time and energy. But the universe itself isn't just sitting passively waiting to be calculated, right?
Not at all.
According to our sources, physical reality is actively redacting information. It's hiding things from us. Let's look at these physical limits, starting with the heavyweight champion of cosmic blind spots, black holes.
Well, black holes represent a profound boundary for human knowledge. The mechanics here are crucial to understand. A black hole isn't just a dark object floating in space.
It's a tear in the fabric.
Yeah, it is a region where space-time is warped so severely by gravity that the escape velocity exceeds the speed of light.
And since nothing travels faster than light, nothing gets out, period.
Exactly. But let's look at what that means for our pursuit of knowledge. Everything we know about the cosmos is gathered by intercepting information photons of light, radio waves, gravitational waves, traveling across space into our telescopes.
Right, we catch the signals.
But the boundary of a black hole, the event horizon, is a one-way street. Once information crosses that threshold, it can never, ever send a signal back out. The universe has essentially put up a quarantine zone.
So we can't see what's inside.
We can measure the black hole's mass, its spin, and its charge. But the internal state, the actual reality inside that horizon, is permanently severed from our observable universe.
It's a localized blind spot. You literally can't know what's in there. But the sources point out an even more staggering physical limit, one that isn't just localized to a specific collapsed star, but applies to the entire fabric of the cosmos. Cosmic horizons.
This is where it gets really scale-heavy. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the universe isn't static. It is actively expanding. And the critical detail is that this expansion is accelerating, driven by what astrophysicists call dark energy.
Space itself is stretching.
Space itself is stretching.
Okay, here's how I try to wrap my head around this. Imagine you are on a massive, infinitely stretchy treadmill. You're trying to run toward a friend who is far away on the same treadmill.
Okay, I picture it.
But the treadmill itself is stretching apart. The physical space between you and your friend is growing. Now, if the treadmill stretches faster than your maximum running speed, you will never, ever reach your friend.
That is the exact mechanism happening in space. Light has a maximum speed limit. Because the space between us and the most distant galaxies is expanding faster than the speed of light, the photons emitted by those galaxies right now will simply never reach our telescopes.
They are trying to run toward us, but the space they are traveling through is stretching too fast.
Yes, meaning there are entire clusters of galaxies, vast swaths of the physical universe that have permanently crossed over our cosmic horizon.
They are just mathematically redacted. We can never observe them, interact with them, or know anything about their current state. That is a terrifyingly hard limit on what can be known.
It creates an observable bubble. We live inside a bubble of light, and whatever is outside that bubble is eternally lost to us.
Okay, so we've established that the massive astronomical scale of the universe puts up these giant walls. But surely, if we zoom in, right, if we go in the opposite direction, down to the microscopic subatomic level, things get clearer.
You certainly think so.
Yeah, if we look at the fundamental building blocks of matter, we should find sharp, precise certainty. Everything should be neat and tidy.
But physics tells us the exact opposite. When we descend into the quantum realm, we hit what the sources describe as quantum limits. And this isn't just about things being extremely small.
What is it about?
It's about a fundamental blurriness built right into the fabric of reality. The cornerstone of this is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
No, I feel like Heisenberg gets name-dropped in pop culture constantly, usually just as a synonym for things are unpredictable. But what is the actual mechanical limit it places on our knowledge?
It's a very specific mathematical trade-off. The principle states that you cannot simultaneously know both the precise position and the precise momentum of a quantum particle, like an electron.
Momentum being its speed and direction. So wait, I can't know exactly where an electron is and exactly where it's going at the exact same time.
Correct. You have to choose. And to understand why, we have to look at how we gather knowledge in the first place.
Yeah.
To see an object, you bounce light off it.
Like a radar gun.
Right. In the macro world, bouncing light off a car doesn't change the car's trajectory. But an electron is so incredibly tiny that to measure its exact position, you have to hit it with a high-energy photon.
Oh, so the act of observing it requires physically interacting with it. You have to touch it.
Yes. And that high-energy photon acts like a cue ball in billiards. It hits the electron to tell you exactly where it is, But the collision completely alters the electron's momentum. It knocks it away.
Okay, so what if I want to measure its momentum instead?
Conversely, if you want to measure its momentum accurately without knocking it away, you have to use low-energy, long-wavelength light. That gives you a very precise reading of its speed, but the wave is so long it leaves its position incredibly fuzzy and ill-defined.
So it's a catch-22. If I measure the location, I ruin the speed. If I measure the speed, I lose the location.
But wait, I have to ask the obvious question here.
Yeah.
Isn't this just a hardware problem?
A hardware problem.
Yeah, like, sure, our current microscopes and lasers are too clunky, so they bump the electron. But what if, say, in 1,000 years, we invent a completely passive, flawless measuring device? Won't we be able to see both then?
That is the intuitive human response, absolutely. But it is fundamentally incorrect. The sources are emphatic about this. This is not a technological failing. It is not what philosophers call a practical limit. Really, so better tech won't fix it.
No. It is a fundamental property of the universe
But how can blurriness be a property?
because of wave-particle duality. A quantum particle isn't a tiny hard sphere like a marble. It exists as a wave of probabilities until it is measured. It literally does not possess a perfectly defined position and momentum simultaneously.
That is wow.
It's like asking for the exact latitude and longitude of a musical chord. The concept itself doesn't apply to the object. Nature has hard-coded a blur into the foundational layer of reality. The bottom of the universe is not pixelated, it is inherently uncertain.
That is staggering. The universe is actively forbidding us from having a crystal clear picture of its foundation. So let's take stock of where we are. Our brains are biologically constrained. Computers hit thermodynamic limits. Black holes swallow information whole. Expanding space runs away from us faster than light, and the quantum world is fundamentally blurry,
The physical universe is a fortress of limits.
which naturally drives intellectuals to seek refuge elsewhere. If the physical world is messy, limited, and blurry, then the pursuit of perfect, boundless knowledge must retreat into the abstract, right?
Exactly. We seek a clean, controlled environment.
And that leads us to a massive pivot in our deep dive today. We leave the physical universe behind and enter the realm of pure logic, mathematics.
Mathematics has long been viewed as the ultimate sanctuary of truth. It's the universal language.
Yeah.
It doesn't rely on clunky microscopes or the speed of light. It relies on pure, deductive reasoning.
Right, it feels flawless. 2 + 2 = 4. It equals 4 today, it equaled 4 a billion years ago, and it equals 4 inside a black hole. It is absolute.
It is the bedrock.
This transition brings us to the heart of the mathematical limit. And to understand why this is so critical, we have to look at the historical dream of mathematics, an era the sources highlight very vividly.
We have to travel back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Mathematics was advancing at a breakneck pace, and mathematicians wanted to ensure the entire discipline was built on absolute bedrock. They wanted to formalize everything.
They wanted to write the ultimate, unbreakable rulebook for logic.
Yes. And the towering figure in this movement was a German mathematician named David Hilbert. Hilbert championed a vision that came to be known as Hilbert's program.
And what was his goal?
He believed that mathematics could be structured into a perfect formal system that possessed two absolutely essential qualities. It needed to be complete, and it needed to be consistent.
Okay, we need to define those terms deeply because everything in this next section hinges on them. Let's start with a complete system. What does that mean?
A complete system means that every single true statement within that system can be mathematically proven using the system's own rules.
So no unanswerable questions.
Exactly. There are no loose ends, no mathematical mysteries. If a statement about numbers is true, you can write a step-by-step proof demonstrating why it is true from the foundational axioms. The system can account for everything within its domain.
Got it. And the second requirement, a consistent system.
A consistent system means there are no paradoxes, no contradictions. The rules will never, ever allow you to prove a statement and simultaneously prove the opposite of that exact statement.
Because if a mathematical system can prove that 2 + 2 = 4, but due to some weird loophole in the rules, it can also prove that 2 + 2 = 5, the entire system collapses, right?
Oh, completely collapses. In logic, this is known as the principle of explosion. If a system contains a single contradiction, you can use that contradiction to technically prove literally anything, and the system loses all meaning.
So Hilbert's dream was a fortress that was entirely complete, capturing every truth, and entirely consistent, containing zero contradictions.
Right. The belief was that human intellect could build this perfect machine of pure reason. It was an incredibly optimistic time.
But then came the year 1931.
1931 brought Kurt Gödel, an Austrian mathematician who published what is now known as Gödel's first incompleteness theorem. And it didn't just challenge Hilbert's dream, it annihilated it.
The sources refer to it as an earthquake in the history of human thought. What exactly did Gödel prove that caused such a shockwave?
He proved mathematically that in any consistent formal system that is complex enough to do basic arithmetic like addition and multiplication, there will always be statements that are objectively true, but absolutely unprovable within that system.
I really want to make sure we nail the mechanism here. The source material offers an analogy for this, and I want to expand on it because it's brilliant. Imagine you have a rule book for an incredibly complex board game.
Okay, a massive rule book.
Yeah. The creators of this game spent decades refining this rule book, trying to ensure it covers every possible scenario, every movement, every scoring calculation.
They want the rule book to be complete and consistent, in Hilbert's terms.
Right. But then you are playing the game, and a specific configuration of pieces emerges on the board. You look at it, the other players look at it, and it is undeniably, observably true that this configuration exists and functions in a specific way.
You can see it happening.
But when you frantically flip through the massive rulebook to find the sequence of rules that explains or resolves this board state, the rulebook comes up completely empty.
The rules literally cannot produce the reality you are observing.
Exactly. And the terrifying part is, the rulebook isn't wrong. It doesn't contain errors or contradictions.
Yeah.
It's just structurally incomplete. It lacks the capacity to prove every single truth that can naturally arise within its own game.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Gödel proved that arithmetic itself, the foundation of mathematics, is that board game. No matter how many axioms or rules you write, there will always be truths on the board that the rules cannot reach.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How did a human being actually prove that some things are unprovable? Because that just sounds like a paradox in itself. The source material walks us through the logic, and it involves basically weaponizing a self-referential paradox.
The genius of Gödel was his ability to translate metalogic statements about math into actual math. He used a concept very similar to the famous liar's paradox.
The ancient version of that is simply the sentence, "This statement is false."
Right, which ties your brain in a knot, because if the statement is true, it's false, and if it's false, it's true. It's an endless loop.
But Gödel upgraded it, didn't he?
He upgraded it profoundly. Instead of truth and falsehood, he focused on provability. He constructed a mathematical statement that essentially says, this statement cannot be proven within this system.
Okay, let's dissect the logic of that sentence, just like the source does, step by step. The statement is, this statement cannot be proven. Let's look at the first scenario. What if the statement is mathematically false?
If the statement, this statement cannot be proven, is false, then the opposite of the statement must be true.
Which would be?
The opposite is, this statement can be proven.
But wait, if a statement can be mathematically proven, that automatically makes the original statement true, because a valid proof only establishes truth.
Precisely. If we assume the statement is false, it leads to a proof, which means it's actually true. That is a fatal contradiction.
And remember the golden rule of Hilbert's dream. The system must be consistent. It cannot contain contradictions.
Therefore, our assumption must be wrong. The statement cannot be false.
Which leaves only the second scenario. What if the statement is true?
If the statement, this statement cannot be proven, is true, well, then it simply cannot be proven.
It just sits there, existing as a fact.
Yes, there is no contradiction here. The statement tells you it can't be proven, and it is correct. It cannot be proven. The system remains consistent, but it is now undeniably incomplete.
Therefore, it is a mathematical truth that exists completely outside the realm of mathematical proof.
Exactly. Gödel figured out a way to encode that linguistic paradox into strict mathematical equations using a system called Gödel numbering. He proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that a formal mathematical system cannot be both consistent and complete. You have to choose.
And since an inconsistent system, a math that contradicts itself, is entirely useless, we must accept that our math is permanently incomplete.
We have to accept the blind spots.
That alone is mind-blowing. It proves there are unfixable blind spots in pure logic. But he didn't stop there. He published Gödel's second incompleteness theorem, which is almost like a cruel twist of the knife.
The second theorem is deeply humbling. It states that no sufficiently powerful consistent system can ever prove its own consistency.
Meaning the mathematical system cannot vouch for its own reliability.
Right. You cannot use the rules of arithmetic to prove that arithmetic won't eventually break and produce a contradiction. It's like a person testifying in court that they never lie. You can't use their own testimony as proof of their honesty.
So how do you prove it?
To prove this system is consistent, you have to step outside of it. You have to rely on a larger, more powerful metasystem.
But wait, wouldn't that larger metasystem have the exact same problem? You'd need an even larger system to vouch for the metasystem.
It creates an infinite regress, an endless chain. To illustrate this, the source uses an incredibly evocative analogy about a library. I want you to imagine a colossal, infinite library containing every single mathematical proof known to humanity. Millions of volumes of pure logic.
You'd think that library contains everything there is to know about math.
You would. But Gödel's first theorem proves that floating outside those books are unprovable truths. True statements that the rules in those books simply cannot generate.
So naturally, the human response is, let's just capture them. We write a new book containing those unprovable truths, and we add it to the library's collection. We patch the hole.
But the very act of adding that new book changes the nature of the library. You have created a new, slightly larger system.
Yeah.
And Gödel's mathematics dictates that this new, larger system instantly generates new, unprovable truths.
So the blind spot just moves.
It doesn't just move, it multiplies. So you write another book to capture the new truths. But adding that book creates yet another system, which spawns even more unprovable truths. The horizon constantly recedes. The process literally never ends.
It is the ultimate proof that the universe is not the jigsaw puzzle we thought it was. It is the procedurally generated map. But I think it is really important to clarify something here, because a lot of people hear this and think, oh, so math is broken. We can't trust logic.
That is a fundamental misinterpretation. Math works beautifully. The device you are using to listen to this, the satellites orbiting the Earth, the structural integrity of skyscrapers, all of it functions on the extreme reliability of mathematics. Gödel did not prove that math is wrong.
He proved that it's infinitely deep.
Exactly. He showed that mathematical truth is a much larger category than mathematical proof. Uncertainty isn't just a byproduct of humans not being smart enough. Uncertainty is woven into the very fabric of logic itself.
Okay, let's synthesize where we are. Because we've established some incredibly daunting parameters, biology puts finite limits on the processing power of our brains.
Right.
The physical universe uses black holes and cosmic expansion to hide vast amounts of reality from us. The quantum world is inherently structurally blurry. And Gödel has definitively shown us that pure logic itself has permanent blind spots. We can never, ever put a neat little bow on the universe and call it solved.
Which naturally raises the ultimate question. If knowledge can never be a closed, completed set, does that mean the pursuit of it goes on forever?
This brings us to the endless horizon of questions, the exploration of possibility too. If there is no final limit, what does the trajectory of human discovery actually look like moving forward?
When we look at the historical timeline of science, we see a very clear repeating pattern. Every time we secure an answer, that answer acts as a door to a room filled with entirely new mysteries.
The sources trace this lineage perfectly. Think about the very earliest stages of human inquiry. Ancient humans looked up at the night sky and asked fundamental questions. What are those lights? Why do the seasons change? Why does the moon change shape?
And over millennia, astronomy and physics answered those questions. We decoded celestial mechanics, we understood planetary orbits, we grasped the Earth's axial tilt.
But acquiring those answers did not end the discipline of astronomy. It vastly expanded it.
Because once we had telescopes and modern physics, we started looking closer at the matter itself. We discovered atoms. I can imagine the scientific hubris at that moment. We found the indivisible fundamental building block of reality. We found the bottom of the map.
But the atom wasn't the bottom. Discovering atoms immediately gave us the tools to split them, which led to the discovery of subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, electrons.
Which birthed quantum mechanics.
Yes. And investigating those particles led to the discovery of quarks and leptons and bosons. The rabbit hole just gets infinitely deeper.
We see the exact same fractal progression in biology. The discovery of DNA in the mid-20th century was a monumental triumph. We finally cracked the code of life.
But understanding the double helix didn't close the book on biology. It violently tore it open. It birthed the entire fields of genetics, genomics, and epigenetics. We learned how the code works, only to realize we now have to figure out how the code expresses itself, how it mutates, how it interacts with the environment.
And on the macro, cosmic scale, the progression is equally staggering. 100 years ago, we thought the Milky Way galaxy was the entire universe. Then Edwin Hubble proved there are other galaxies out there.
Which was a massive expansion of our map.
Huge. But understanding how those galaxies rotate and interact led to a terrifying realization. There isn't enough visible, ordinary matter to account for the gravity holding them together.
Which spawned the greatest mysteries in modern physics. Dark matter and dark energy, things we can't see, can't touch, but mathematically know must make up 95% of the universe.
This historical pattern highlights a crucial philosophical point made in the text. Science is a method, not a finish line. The general public often views science as a slow march toward a final day, where they close up the laboratories, turn off the lights, and say, well, we figured it all out.
But scientists do not view their work that way.
Not at all. The evolution of gravity is the perfect illustration of this. You have Isaac Newton in the 17th century. He figures out the laws of motion, writes the equations for gravity. He can predict the path of a cannonball and the orbit of planets. And for a couple of centuries, we thought, okay, gravity is solved.
But Newton's explanation, while incredibly accurate for daily life, wasn't the final truth. It was a functional approximation. It told us what gravity did, but not how or why.
Then Albert Einstein comes along in 1915 with general relativity and provides a massively deeper explanation. He shows that gravity isn't an invisible tether pulling things together. It is the physical warping of the fabric of space-time by mass and energy.
But Einstein isn't the finish line either, because general relativity works beautifully for giant things like stars and planets. But it completely breaks down when you try to apply it to the tiny quantum world.
Exactly. So now, the brightest minds in physics are desperately searching for a theory of quantum gravity, or string theory, trying to reconcile the massive and the microscopic. Science continuously improves explanations. It's an endless process of refinement.
And this progression leads philosophers and physicists to wonder about the fundamental architecture of reality. What if the universe possesses infinite complexity?
What does that actually look like?
Well, imagine reality is constructed like Russian nesting dolls, but they never, ever stop. We talked about atoms containing particles, particles containing quarks. What if quarks contain oscillating strings of energy, and those strings contain something even more fundamental ad infinitum?
Right. If that downward journey into the microscopic continues forever, if there's always a smaller, more intricate structure to investigate, then by definition, knowledge could never end. There would always be another layer to peel back.
And we know this infinite potential exists in mathematics. Even acknowledging Gödel's limits, the realm of math itself is boundless.
Consider the simplest mathematical act. Counting. 1, 2, 3. You can continue counting forever. There's no concept of a largest number. You can always just add 1.
Right.
In the exact same way, the conceptual landscape of mathematics is infinite. New geometries, new topological spaces, new abstract algebras can continually be conceptualized and explored. If the foundation is infinite, the tower of knowledge you build upon it must also be infinite.
Okay, I want to bring the human element back into this equation. Earlier, we established that our brains are too small, our biology is a bottleneck. But humanity is actively hacking its own biology. We are not necessarily the final stage of intelligence on this planet.
The sources address this exact point. They point toward future technologies that could vastly expand our cognitive horizons. We are talking about advanced artificial general intelligence, deeply integrated brain-computer interfaces, transhumanism.
The idea that what seems completely incomprehensible to my organic brain today might be a standard textbook concept for an augmented human or a super AI in 200 years.
History demonstrates that practical technological limits are meant to be shattered. Before the invention of the lens, the microscopic world was invisible to us. Germ theory was literally inconceivable because we couldn't see the germs. Technology gave us new eyes. Future technology could give us new minds.
So what does this all mean? Let's extrapolate this to its absolute limit. If we keep building better AI, if we create a superintelligence that has the processing power of 1 billion human brains, and we give it 1 billion years to think, could that superintelligence eventually just know everything? Could it finish the puzzle?
It is the ultimate sci-fi scenario, but based on the mechanics we've explored today, the source material suggests that even a hypothetical, godlike superintelligence would fail to achieve complete, absolute knowledge.
Why? If it has infinite processing power and infinite time.
Because it is still operating within the universe, subject to the universe's structural walls. A superintelligence cannot look inside a black hole. It cannot receive light from beyond the cosmic horizon. It cannot force a quantum particle to resolve its position and momentum simultaneously.
Because those aren't tech problems, they're universe problems.
Exactly. And most importantly, because it relies on logic and mathematics to process information, it is trapped by Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
It is subject to the rules of the board game.
Precisely. Even an infinite AI relies on formal systems. And Gödel proved that any formal system will generate unprovable truths. The AI would just keep generating new, incredibly complex questions, rapidly expanding its own library of unprovable truths. It would experience the boundless horizon just as we do, only at a much faster processing speed.
Which brings us to a profound realization, a concept that really synthesizes everything we've talked about today: the paradox of knowledge. We've established that there are hard, immutable limits imposed by physics, biology, and logic, yet the landscape of what can be known appears infinitely expansive. How do we reconcile these two realities?
We reconcile them by understanding that these two seemingly contradictory truths actually work in tandem to create a deeply beautiful paradox. And the source material provides a stunning visual analogy to help us truly grasp the emotional weight of this.
The spotlight analogy, this is the image that has been stuck in my head since I read the text. I want you to imagine you are standing completely alone in the middle of a massive, pitch-black field at night. You have a small, cheap flashlight in your hand. You click it on.
That small, dim circle of light hitting the grass represents your current knowledge. It is what humanity currently understands. Because the flashlight is small, you don't see very much of the field. But look closely at the edge of the light. Look at the perimeter, the exact boundary where the illuminated grass meets the pitch-black darkness. Because the circle is small, the circumference of that boundary is also quite small. You are only directly interacting with a tiny fraction of the unknown.
Right. Now imagine a technological leap. You trade that little flashlight for a massive stadium-sized spotlight. You flip the switch. Suddenly, the circle of light is enormous. You see trees, you see hills, you see so much more of the field. Your knowledge has expanded exponentially.
But look at the boundary again. Look at the perimeter where the light meets the dark.
The circumference has grown massively.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the paradox of knowledge. The perimeter of the light represents our awareness of what we do not know. As the circle of what we know grows larger, our contact with the unknown grows proportionally larger. The more humanity learns, the larger our awareness of our own ignorance becomes.
It flips the whole concept of learning on its head. We assume that acquiring knowledge decreases our ignorance. But in reality, greater knowledge reveals greater ignorance. It illuminates how much we didn't even know we didn't know.
And this is not just philosophical poetry. This is the active, lived reality of the scientific consensus right now. The sources make it unequivocally clear. Physicists, biologists, and mathematicians do not believe humanity is anywhere close to knowing everything.
The list of massive, glaring gaps in our understanding is staggering. We've mentioned a few, but the text lays out the heavy hitters. We still don't truly understand dark matter or dark energy.
Which is wild to think about.
Yeah. That means we don't know what 95% of the universe is actually made of. We are sailing on an ocean we can't even see.
We also have no idea how consciousness actually works. This is known in philosophy as the hard problem. We can track the electrical impulses in the brain, but we have absolutely no mechanism to explain how firing neurons magically generate subjective internal experience, how meat produces the feeling of being alive.
We haven't solved the origin of life from non-living matter. We are still fiercely debating the fundamental nature of time, whether it flows, whether it's an illusion, whether it exists at the quantum level, and we certainly do not know the ultimate fate of the universe.
These are not minor details. They are not footnotes. These are the foundational load-bearing columns of reality. We are currently standing under a very powerful spotlight, but the darkness surrounding us is vaster, deeper, and more complex than we ever could have imagined back when we only had a flashlight. Enormous gaps remain, and filling them will, inevitably, only reveal even larger gaps.
So to bring this massive journey to a close, let's synthesize what we've discovered today. We started by asking a singular, profound question. Is there a final limit to knowledge?
And the most logical conclusion? Synthesizing everything from the biological constraints of our brains, to the thermodynamic limits of computing, to the physical censorship of black holes, to the inherent blurriness of quantum mechanics, and finally, to the unyielding mathematical boundaries proven by Gödel.
Is that human access to knowledge definitely has limits. We are finite creatures operating within a highly constrained system.
But And this is the absolute crux of the matter. There is zero evidence that the landscape of knowledge itself has an endpoint. The universe presents as infinitely complex. Mathematics is infinitely expansive, and every single scientific discovery we make is simply a door leading to a new, longer hallway of mysteries.
The map has no edge. There is no known final limit. The pursuit of understanding may continue indefinitely, outlasting humanity, outlasting our technology, perhaps outlasting the stars themselves.
It's an endless frontier.
Before we wrap up, spending this much time thinking about the endless horizon has me thinking beyond just the source material. It feels like this constantly retreating edge of knowledge, this unfinishable puzzle, tells us something deeply profound about what it actually means to be a conscious being.
It leads to a fascinating thought experiment. If the edge between the known and the unknown is constantly expanding, if that spotlight keeps growing but the darkness grows with it, perhaps we've been valuing the wrong thing.
What do you mean?
Perhaps the true value of knowledge isn't in reaching a final, static destination where everything is solved. Perhaps the ultimate value is in the evolution of the mind, the transformation of consciousness that occurs during the pursuit itself. Consider the alternative. If we ever did somehow know everything, if the puzzle was definitively finished and there were absolutely no more mysteries to solve, would we lose the very curiosity that animates us?
Wow. If the journey ended, would we lose the core of our humanity? If there is nothing left to seek, what is the purpose of the mind?
That is an incredible thought to leave on. Thank you so much for coming along on this deep dive today. Hope you walk away looking at the map of reality a little differently, realizing that the absence of an edge isn't a failure, it's an invitation. Keep asking questions, keep pushing the boundaries of your own spotlight, and we will catch you next time.